Hello everybody, welcome back. How do? Hope you're good. I'm doing well. So today, let's start off by saying, fathers, lock up your daughters and your sons, because today we're doing it Greek. Isn't that the great thing about words? In one sentence you can insult an entire nation of people, their culture, and one of the richest cultural histories in the history of the human species. So anyway, there you go. The Greeks. If I was going to be doing books, I probably should have started with these guys, as far as Western literature is concerned, because with the exception of maybe the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was way back, the Greeks sort of started it. So where to start with the Greeks? Well, probably two of the more obvious ones would be these guys. The Iliad and the Odyssey. The Iliad is the story of the Trojan War. Little note for those who did not know, the Trojan horse wasn't actually Trojan. It was a Greek horse sent into the city of Troy. But that's the other thing about the Trojan horse. Don't you think Trojan is a terrible name for a condom? I mean, why was the Trojan horse famous? Because they packed a whole bunch of things inside it, and when nobody's looking, they all jumped out and destroyed the city. Bad name for a condom. So that is the Iliad, the story of the Trojan War. The Odyssey is the story of Odysseus trying to get back home. Now, a lot of the basis for the Greek myths that we know, we find in these two works. I have it on good authority that the Richmond Lattimore translations, which is the two I have here, I have a few copies of these actually, but these were the ones that I studied with at UBC. They came very highly recommended from my prof. Moving on. Something else that the Greeks were famous for, other than really bloody war and fantastic architecture and art, I might add, was philosophy. Now, you may have heard of Socrates, or Socrates, if you live in the White House. Socrates didn't actually write anything. All of the Socratic dialogues were written down by his student Plato. This is all of them. There's some, I mean, trying to actually really get into it in, you know, this would be an extra boring video. Not that I'm saying this is boring stuff, just talking about it by yourself to a digital camera. It's a bit much. So you have Socrates, his student Plato wrote about Socrates. Then one of Plato's students was a gentleman by the name of Aristotle. Now the neat thing about Aristotle, neat thing about all Greek philosophy actually, all old philosophies for that matter, yes, the translations do vary, but this book here is 60 years old, and I have texts from when I studied that were, you know, they're less than 15, but it's still very much the same thing. Something that I would definitely recommend if you're getting into Aristotle would be Rhetoric and Poetics. Neat stuff. Also, the Ethics is good, but I would recommend starting with the Poetics, because it's sort of the most accessible of the Aristotle, because he really gets into some sort of early science as well, which can be a bit of a burden if it's your first time out with the Greek philosophers. Moving on. Greek myth. If you actually tried to timeline through all the stories, Greek myth, you'd have to, you know, get in touch with some of the physicists at MIT to figure out just how many dimensions you could use. It was actually a project I was considering, but my teacher said, "Baron, don't bother, you'll be at it for the next 15 years, to make an actual 3D model of the timeline of Greek myth." They cross, but it's the nature of stories. They're storytellers. They're basically, it's the general idea, not necessarily the fact. That's important. Speaking of which, Heracles, not Hercules. Hercules was Roman. Heracles was the Greek. Has a rather interesting story behind him. This is a book called The Nature of Greek Myths by G.S. Kirk. And it doesn't necessarily tell the stories, it examines the stories, but getting back to Heracles, excuse me. Heracles had a miraculous birth. He had a god for a father. Very little is known of his childhood. He went through the 12 labors, doing great and miraculous things that seemed supernatural. He ran afoul of the public authorities and was put to death. And they put his body on a funeral pyre, set it alight. Now, when you burn a body, it doesn't actually all burn, which is why crematoriums have grinders as well. But when the fire was gone, all of his earthly remains had disappeared. Remind you of anyone else you know? Greek myth. Gotta love it. Now, though the sagas, like the Iliad and the Odyssey, are amazing stuff, great stories, the basis of a lot of the stories we still tell today. And the myths are interesting. The philosophy is incredible. But for my 2 cents, which you're getting right now, the Greeks best described what could very poorly be described as the human condition in their plays. You have Sophocles and the Theban plays, which are the stories of Oedipus and Antigone. If you don't know who Oedipus was, find out. It's got nothing to do with the Freudian aspect of it, because there would be no Freudian aspect to the Oedipus plays if there were no Oedipus plays. So this is the beginning of all that. Then you have Euripides, who basically looks at the ideas of religious skepticism and violence. The plays in this one are Ion, the Woman of Troy, Helen, and the Bacchae. And the Bacchae is a very bloody play, investigating that very thing, the nature of human violence. And then you have Aeschylus with the Orestean trilogy, which is the idea of, can justice truly be found among humans? So, that's the Greeks. Good stuff. I realized that was a very brief overview of centuries of goodness. But it's just to give you some ideas. I mean, you know, if you have anything you want to throw back, that's what the comment box is for. Discourse is always good. I'm sure most of you will agree, because if you've actually spent the time watching these videos, then we are probably of a like mind. So now we just have to go out and brainwash some more people, or unbrainwash some people, I suppose, and have at her. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.